I slept with my cousin. Ever have that gut feeling something's about to go wrong, but you push through anyway, thinking you can handle whatever comes? That's how it began for me. Out of nowhere, I got a call from my cousin Katie. We weren't close growing up, barely even liked each other. But family is family, right? When she called, sounding desperate, saying she'd lost her job and had nowhere to go, I couldn't just turn my back on her. So I did what I thought any decent person would do. I offered her a place to stay. I figured it'd be temporary, just until she got back on her feet, and then she'd move out. My wife Lisa didn't take it that way. She flipped out as soon as I told her. "Do you really think it's a good idea to let her live here?" she asked, arms crossed, giving me the cold glare she'd perfected over the years. I understood. Lisa never liked Katie, thought she was a mess who would leech off us as long as she could. "It's just until she finds a job," I said, trying to calm her down. But calming Lisa is like trying to tame a storm. She got louder. "She's going to ruin everything. You know how she is." But I was stubborn, insisting that family sticks together, and I couldn't just leave her with nowhere to go. After a shouting match and some slammed doors, Lisa stormed off to the bedroom, leaving me in the living room, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. A few days later, Katie showed up with a couple of suitcases and a tired look. I'll admit it felt good to help her out. Despite everything, she was family. At first, everything was calm. Katie mostly kept to herself, helped out around the house, and didn't interfere. She even pitched in with cooking and cleaning, which was more than I expected. But then Lisa started acting differently. At first, it was subtle. She'd come home from work, see Katie and me joking around in the kitchen, and get passive-aggressive. "Must be nice to hang out all day while some of us actually work," she'd say. I brushed it off, thinking she was just adjusting to the change, but the snide comments kept coming and grew sharper. It didn't help that Katie was actually making things easier around the house. It was like she was trying to prove herself. But that only made Lisa angrier. Anytime I mentioned that Katie had made dinner or folded laundry, Lisa would twist it. "Looks like you've got a new housewife," she'd sneer. When I tried defending Katie, it only fueled Lisa's anger. Our arguments became intense, with shouting matches that probably woke the neighbors. Lisa accused me of being too close to Katie, like I was playing house with her. But Katie would sit in the other room, likely hearing everything, then pretend the next day like nothing had happened. The tension in our house was unbearable. I'd walk in after work and feel it immediately, Lisa glaring at me, just waiting for me to mess up. Katie would suggest leaving, but I couldn't bring myself to kick her out. It didn't feel right. The jealousy got worse, and Lisa's suspicion turned into paranoia. If I spent too much time in the same room as Katie, Lisa would lose it. One night after dinner, Lisa exploded. She threw her plate down, shattering it, and screamed, "I bet you wish she was your wife. Don't you?" Then she stormed out, leaving me standing there, speechless. I looked at Katie, who stared back at me, wide-eyed and silent. I didn't know what to say. I was torn between comforting my wife and not throwing Katie under the bus, and part of me wondered if Lisa was just overreacting, letting jealousy take control. Then I started noticing other things about Lisa. She was coming home later and later, saying she had to work late, but her excuses didn't add up. Sometimes she'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. Other times she'd walk in, see me with Katie, and just roll her eyes, as if she couldn't stand the sight of me. "We need to talk about this," I said one night, trying to get Lisa to open up, trying to figure out what was happening to us. But she brushed me off. "I'm tired, Mike. Can we not do this right now?" And that was the end of it. She shut down any attempt at a real conversation, and I was left questioning everything. Was it a mistake to let Katie stay? Was I blind to something obvious? I thought I was just being a good guy, helping out family, but now everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. And Lisa, the person I was supposed to trust more than anyone, was turning into someone I didn't even recognize. It was like she hated me more every day. And so it all began with an unexpected guest unraveling everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The changes started small little things you might notice but ignore. Lisa started coming home late more often, always with an excuse about a big project at work or helping her boss. I wanted to believe her, but her moods were all over the place. One night she'd be tense, barely speaking to me. The next, she'd act overly cheerful, like she was trying too hard to pretend everything was fine. I'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at my cold dinner, waiting for her to come home, trying to make sense of it all, but whenever I tried to talk to her, she'd shut me down. "I'm just tired," Mike, she'd say dismissively, and that was the end of it. I'd go to bed with more questions than answers, feeling like I was losing my wife to something, or someone I couldn't see. Everything changed one night on my way home from work. I took a different route through downtown to avoid traffic, and that's when I saw them, Lisa and some guy, standing outside a fancy restaurant. I recognized him right away. It was Daniel, the colleague she'd mentioned before. But they weren't just standing there, they were laughing, leaning in close, like they were sharing a private joke. I saw her touch his arm, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. I pulled over a block away and just sat there, staring at them through the rearview mirror, my stomach in knots. It wasn't anything overt, they weren't holding hands or kissing, but the intimacy between them was undeniable. I wanted to jump out of the car and confront them right then, but I stayed put, my mind racing, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were just co-workers getting along well, but deep down my instincts were screaming at me. When Lisa got home later that night, I tried to stay calm. "So how's Daniel?" I asked, testing the waters. She looked at me with that fake innocence she's so good at. "What do you mean?" she replied, her tone flat, dismissive. "I saw you two together," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. And then came the performance, the fake surprise, the defensive scoff. "For God's sake, Mike, we were just grabbing a bite after work. He's just a friend, okay? Don't make this into something it's not." But I knew Lisa. I knew when she was lying. That night she was lying through her teeth. She wouldn't look me in the eye, her words circling in endless excuses. My blood boiled at the thought of being made a fool. I didn't push it further. Part of me didn't want to hear any more lies, but it gnawed at me. That night I turned to Katie. She was the only one who seemed to understand the turmoil inside our house. After Lisa stormed off to bed in one of her moods, I pulled Katie aside. "Can I talk to you about something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Katie gave me a look like she'd been waiting for me to finally open up. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. I told her everything, the late nights, the changes in Lisa's behavior, and seeing her with Daniel. Katie listened, really listened, without interrupting or judging. When I finished, she shook her head, looking more angry than surprised. "That's not right," she said firmly. "Who acts like that?" Laughing with some guy when she's married, she said it like she couldn't believe Lisa had the nerve. Then she leaned in, her voice low. "You need to keep an eye on her, Mike. If she's up to something, you deserve to know." It felt good to have someone on my side, someone who validated my suspicions. From that point on, I was hyper-aware. Every time Lisa's phone buzzed, every time she left the room to take a call, my heart would race. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was with him, sharing parts of herself that should have been reserved for me. It was driving me crazy. I started keeping mental notes on when she left, when she got home, what she said, searching for some kind of slip-up that would confirm my fears. It wasn't long before the paranoia got the better of me. One night, Lisa was supposed to be working late again. Katie was in the living room, reading, but she looked up as I paced back and forth. "Why don't you just check her phone?" She finally suggested, "If there's nothing to hide, you won't find anything." I didn't need much convincing. Her phone was right there, innocently lying on the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking as I picked it up and unlocked it, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like I was crossing a line, breaking some unspoken rule, but I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. I scrolled through her messages, trying to stay calm. Most of it was just work stuff, chats with friends, but then I saw it. Daniel. His name stared back at me from the screen, and my fingers felt like lead as I tapped on their conversation. The most recent message, sitting right at the top, was simple: "Let's meet up. Same place as last time." My world tilted. My head spun, and I gripped the phone tighter. There it was, clear as day. All my suspicions, the paranoia, the gut feeling, it all crystallized in that one message. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was, the proof staring me in the face. I put the phone down, my mind racing. I looked over at Katie, who had been watching me closely. "Well?" she asked, sitting up straighter. I told her what I found, and she shook her head, cursing under her breath. "She's a piece of work," Mike, Katie said, her voice cold with anger. "You deserve better than this." I knew she was right, but what the hell was I supposed to do now? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a dark, endless abyss, knowing that whatever I did next would change everything. After finding that message, I couldn't think straight. My mind was spinning. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. Betrayal isn't real until it's staring you in the face in the form of a simple, stupid text message. Something so small, yet powerful enough to shatter your world in an instant. I didn't know what to do, so I did what had become routine over the past few weeks. I turned to Katie. She was in the kitchen, making coffee like it was just another normal night. But when I walked in, I must have looked like a ghost because she immediately put the mug down and rushed over. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm, but her eyes intense. I handed her the phone, pointing to Daniel's message. She read it, her lips tightening into a thin line, her eyes narrowing. "See," I said, my voice breaking from a mix of anger and disbelief. "She's meeting him tonight." Katie looked up at me, anger flashing in her eyes. "You know what you need to do," she said, setting the phone down. "You need to catch her in the act. Make her face what she's doing. She's not going to tell you the truth, trust me." It felt surreal, like something out of a bad TV drama, but at that point I was desperate. "So what do we do?" I asked, a mixture of dread and determination creeping into my voice. Katie didn't hesitate. "We go to the bar," she said confidently. "We see it for ourselves. She's supposed to meet him tonight, right? Well, we'll be there too." The thought of watching my wife meet up with another man made my stomach churn. I wasn't sure if I was ready to witness it, to see her laugh with him, flirt, doing all the things she used to do with me. But deep down, I knew I needed to see it for myself. I needed the truth, no matter how painful it was. That evening, when Lisa came home to get ready for her so-called girls' night, I pretended everything was normal. I sat on the couch, watching TV, acting as though nothing was wrong. She walked in, cheerful as ever, and headed straight to the bathroom to shower and change. As I listened to the water running, it felt like every drop was another nail in the coffin of our relationship. When she finally emerged, she looked stunning, wearing a tight dress that hugged her figure, heels that made her legs seem endless, and her hair styled exactly how I liked it. "Going somewhere special?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. She smiled at me, the same smile that once made me feel like the luckiest guy in the world, but now only made me sick. "Just out with the girls," she said, grabbing her purse. "Don't wait up." The moment she left, I sprang into action. Katie was already ready, and we headed to the bar that Daniel's message had mentioned. It was one of those trendy places, the kind Lisa never went to with me. I wondered how many times she had been there with him. We parked a block away and waited, hearts pounding in sync. Katie leaned over and asked, "Are you ready for this?" I shook my head, knowing there was no turning back. When we walked into the bar, it didn't take long to find them. They were at a booth in the back, cozied up like they were on a romantic date. My stomach dropped. Lisa was laughing, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Daniel was leaning in, whispering something in her ear, and she giggled like a teenager. I wanted to storm over, flip the table, and drag him outside, but Katie grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't," she whispered. "Just watch." So we did. We found a spot at the bar, far enough away to stay unnoticed, but close enough to see everything. As I watched them, my heart shattered over and over. She was happy, completely at ease, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. I couldn't help but wonder if she ever thought about me, or if she felt any guilt at all. Probably not. We watched them order drinks, cocktails, the kind she rarely drank when she was with me. They clinked their glasses, toasting to something I couldn't hear. She smiled, that carefree smile, the one that used to be just for me. Daniel reached out and touched her hand, his fingers brushing her knuckles. She didn't pull away. I felt like I was going to be sick. Katie's hand was still gripping my arm, grounding me, her anger practically radiating. "She doesn't deserve you," Katie whispered, her voice filled with disgust. "Look at her. Look at how easily she lies to you." Part of me wanted to confront them, to call her out in front of everyone in the bar. I wanted to scream at her, ask how she could do this to me, to us. But I felt this overwhelming shame, like if I made a scene, I'd be the one who looked crazy. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking she'd won. So I just sat there, watching my wife flirt with another man, feeling my marriage disintegrate in front of my eyes. After what felt like forever, Daniel stood up and took her hand. They headed toward the exit, and my heart pounded with every step they took. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I had a sinking feeling that it would mark the end of everything. "Come on," Katie said, grabbing her jacket. "Let's get out of here before they see us." We left the bar, And as we walked back to the car, I felt like I was in a daze, my mind numb from what I had just witnessed. "What do we do now?" I asked Katie, my voice barely a whisper. She turned to me, her eyes hard and resolute. "We make her pay," she said simply. And as crazy as it sounded, I believed her. I had to believe her. At that moment, revenge felt like the only thing holding me together. As we drove home, the reality of what I'd seen sank in. My wife, the woman I'd shared my life with for years, was meeting up with some other guy, laughing with him, touching him, making plans behind my back. This wasn't just a fling. This was calculated, deliberate, and that hurt more than I could ever express. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I felt hollow, like a shell of the man I used to be. I knew things were going to change. I just didn't know how or when, but one thing was certain: the woman who walked out of our front door that night wasn't my wife. Not anymore. After we got home, the weight of it all crashed down on me. I couldn't shake the image of Lisa and Daniel together, so happy, while my world was falling apart. It felt like one of those nightmares where you scream but no sound comes out. But this wasn't a dream. This was real, and I was wide awake, watching my marriage crumble before my eyes. Katie was already in the living room, pouring us both a drink. "Here," she said, handing me a glass. "You look like you need this." She was right. I downed half of it in one gulp, feeling the burn in my throat. It did nothing to ease the ache in my chest, but it was better than feeling everything all at once. I sank into the couch, staring blankly at the wall as the silence of the house pressed in on me, like a weight I couldn't escape. Katie sat beside me, closer than usual, and for a while we just sat there in silence, drinking. "Talk to me, Mike," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You can't keep this all bottled up." So I told her everything: the way Lisa's smile was different when she was with him, the touch of their hands, the way she lit up around Daniel in a way she never did with me anymore. And Katie listened, her eyes hardening with every word. "You don't deserve this," she said, almost spitting the words out. "She's making a fool of you. You give her everything, and this is how she repays you." God, I just want to make her suffer. The anger in Katie's voice echoed the frustration boiling inside me. I drained the last of my wine, feeling the tension in my body rise with each second that passed. "Yeah, but what am I supposed to do?" I muttered, staring at my empty glass. "She's out there living some secret life, and I'm stuck here. I don't even know who she is anymore." Katie refilled my glass and leaned in closer, her voice soft but deliberate. "You know, if Lisa's so worried about me being around, maybe we should give her a real reason to be." I blinked, confused, as I looked up at her. "What do you mean?" A sly smile crept across her face, one I hadn't seen before, and it felt like a challenge. "Think about it, Mike. She's out there having fun with Daniel, so maybe it's time she gets a taste of her own medicine. Let her know what it's like to be on the other side." She took a slow sip of her wine, never breaking eye contact, and I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I was stunned. The idea of cheating, of stooping to Lisa's level, had never crossed my mind. I wasn't that kind of person, or at least I didn't think I was. I can't do that," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not like her." "Maybe you should be." Katie shot back, her voice firm. "What's stopping you? She doesn't respect you. She doesn't love you. She's out there living a double life. And you're here playing the good husband, suffering in silence. Screw that, Mike. You deserve to be happy too." I didn't know how to respond. On one hand, the thought of cheating felt like crossing a line I couldn't come back from. But on the other hand, hadn't Lisa already crossed that line? Wasn't she with Daniel right now, lying to me every time she looked at me? I glanced at Katie, and for the first time I saw her not just as my cousin, but as someone who truly understood what I was going through, someone who was ready to stand by me. The wine was working its way through my system, clouding my judgment, blurring the lines between right and wrong. "You really think this is a good idea?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Katie leaned in even closer, the scent of her perfume mixed with wine lingering in the air. "I think it's the only way for you to take back control," she whispered. "She doesn't get to treat you like this and walk away untouched. If she's worried about us, let's give her something real to worry about." It felt like I was in a scene from a movie, the tension between us thick and undeniable. The room seemed to close in around us, filled with unspoken words and the weight of what we were about to do. I wanted to say no, to take the high road, but as Katie's hand brushed against mine, her fingers entwining with mine, something inside me snapped. The anger, the betrayal, the desire for revenge, it all surged to the surface, drowning out every other thought. Before I knew it, I was kissing her. It started slow, tentative, like we were testing the waters. But once we crossed that line, there was no going back. It was messy, frantic, an attempt to feel something, anything besides the pain I'd been carrying for weeks. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt alive. I didn't think about Lisa or Daniel or what this would mean for tomorrow. It was just me and Katie, two people trying to make sense of a world that had crumbled around us. We stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding our clothes, our hands desperately searching for something real, something solid. I knew it was wrong, that this would change everything, but in that moment I didn't care. All I wanted was to escape, to lose myself in someone who actually cared. Katie was right there, meeting my every move, whispering that I deserved this, that I deserved to feel wanted. And for that moment I believed her. When it was over, we lay there tangled in the sheets, breathing heavily. The silence that followed felt comforting, more peaceful than anything I'd felt in weeks. But then reality came crashing back, and I couldn't help but wonder what the hell I had just done. The next morning was a blur. I woke to the sound of the front door opening, and panic hit me like a freight train. Lisa was home. I bolted upright, and there was Katie, still half asleep beside me. It was too late. The door swung open, and there stood Lisa, her eyes wide with disbelief. What the actual F? Lisa's voice sliced through the room like a whip, and my heart dropped into my stomach. She stormed in, her face twisted in rage. "Are you kidding me, Mike?" In our bed. I didn't know what to say. There was no explanation, no excuse. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. But of course Lisa didn't see it that way. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, her voice shaking with fury. "After everything I've done for you, after all these years, and this is how you repay me." Katie got out of bed, wrapping a sheet around herself, trying to calm Lisa down. "Maybe you should think about your own choices before blaming others," she said, her voice calm but firm. But Lisa wasn't having it. "You're both disgusting," she spat, tears streaming down her face, not tears of guilt, but of pure rage. She couldn't fathom how someone could betray her, the queen of hypocrisy. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't regret what I'd done. As I stood there, looking at the woman who had torn our marriage apart, made me doubt my worth, I realized this was the moment everything changed. There was no going back. Lisa's face reddened with anger, her fists clenched tightly as if she was ready to hit someone, me, Katie, or maybe even herself. Her words came out like venom, dripping with bitterness and fury. She launched into a rant about betrayal, acting like the victim in all of this, as if she hadn't been sneaking around with Daniel for who knew how long. "Do you know what you've done?" she shouted, her voice breaking. "You've ruined everything. My life. Our marriage." She turned to Katie, her voice filled with disgust. "And you're a snake. Both of you are disgusting. I can't believe this." A wave of anger surged through me, making it hard to see straight. I was done with her twisted logic, done pretending I was the problem, done with the lies. "You want to talk about betrayal, Lisa," I said, my voice rising to meet hers. "Don't you dare act like the victim here. Don't forget that I know about Daniel." The room went silent. Her mouth fell open, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape. What are you talking about?" she stammered, but I saw the panic in her eyes. "Cut the crap, Lisa," I shot back, stepping closer. "I saw the messages. I saw you two at the bar. Did you think I was an idiot? Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" She froze, her entire body tensing as if bracing for impact. Then, as usual, she tried to spin the situation, bending the truth to make it seem less awful. "It's not what you think," she began, her tone softening as if changing her voice could alter reality. "He's just a friend. I never intended for it to go this far. I was lonely, Mike. You were so wrapped up in your own world, and I needed someone to talk to." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all the torment she'd put me through, she still managed to paint herself as the victim, trying to make it seem like her actions were somehow my fault. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice steady and final. "I can't do this anymore, Lisa. I'm filing for divorce. You and Daniel can have each other." Her face contorted with anger and disbelief. "You're throwing everything away because of one mistake," she screamed. "You'd end our marriage over one stupid thing." "It wasn't a mistake, Lisa, it was a choice," I said, feeling lighter as the words left my mouth. "And you made that choice over and over again." For the first time, she had no rebuttal. She just stood there, trembling with fury, her chest heaving as she shot daggers at me, then at Katie. Without another word, she stormed out, slamming doors and throwing things in a fit of rage as her frustration echoed through the house. Katie and I sat in silence, both knowing we had crossed a line we couldn't uncross, that things would never return to the way they were. A few days later, Katie packed her bags and told me she'd found another place to stay. "I think it's for the best," she said, and I couldn't disagree. There was too much baggage, too much damage done. And while I didn't regret what had happened between us, I knew there was no going back to pretending everything was normal. We tried to keep things amicable after she moved out, but there was always a strange awkwardness between us, like we were constantly tiptoeing around a minefield. As for Lisa, she left the house a week later, leaving behind a note saying she'd stay with a friend until things calmed down. But I knew better. She wasn't waiting for things to blow over, she was avoiding facing what she had done. The divorce was ugly, as they often are. She fought me over every little thing: the house, the money, the furniture. At one point she even tried to guilt me into reconsidering, saying we could work through it, accusing me of being spiteful for wanting to end things. But I stood my ground. It was over, and nothing she said could change that. When the dust finally settled and the papers were signed, I found myself standing in the middle of what used to be our home, feeling a mix of freedom and emptiness. Everything had changed, and I had no idea what came next. But one thing was certain: I was going to rebuild piece by piece. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rediscovering myself. I picked up hobbies I'd long forgotten: fishing, hiking, even learning to cook decent meals for myself. At first, it felt strange trying to fill the void where Lisa had been, but over time, it got easier. I started reconnecting with old friends, people who had faded into the background while my marriage unraveled. Katie and I kept in touch, but whatever had happened between us remained in the past. We both knew it had been a mistake, a desperate reaction to the chaos surrounding us. While there was still a connection between us, we kept things strictly platonic. There were moments, though, when I lay awake at night, replaying everything in my head, wondering if I'd made the right decisions, questioning if I had lost more than I had gained. But over time, I came to realize that forgiveness wasn't about absolving someone else, it was about freeing yourself. So I forgave Lisa as much as I could forgive someone who had shattered my heart. More importantly, I forgave myself for the choices I made, for the things I did out of anger and desperation. Life slowly began to make sense again. I built new routines, created a new sense of normalcy, and eventually I started dating. At first it was just casual, awkward dinners and small talk over coffee. But then I met someone who made me feel like I didn't have to try so hard, someone who saw me for who I really was and didn't expect me to be anything else. As we spent more time together, I realized that love isn't about finding someone who completes you, it's about finding someone who makes you better, someone who pushes you to be honest and open, who trusts you as much as you trust them. Losing Lisa had taught me that lesson, and I came out stronger for it, wiser, and more appreciative of the simple things, like waking up next to someone who actually wanted to be there. Looking back, I have no regrets. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, it all led me to where I am now. And maybe that's what life is about: learning, letting go, and finding new ways to love and be loved, even after everything falls apart.